So today I attended a rulemaking session, and I tend to attend rulemaking sessions because that's been a primary avenue for me to influence health policy in ways that enhance the quality of life of my neighbors. I don't typically share how these rulemaking sessions go because I didn't think a lot of people would be interested in it, but towards the end of the rulemaking session today, the guy running it, who's making the modifications to the law we're talking about, stated that he felt my input would be included in ways that modify the law and make it more palatable and efficacious once it will be enacted down the line. So with that being said, it was a successful appearance at this rulemaking session, and I think some people will likely be able to learn a lot from it. So here's how I did it. Much love.
We also provide some industry recognized state, national, and local organizations that include but are not limited to the following. Oh, Dr. Greg.
Yes, thank you so much, Ted. I wanted to speak to this part of what we're talking about. Everyone, I'm Dr. Greg. I'm a certified peer counselor and psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner with a doctorate of nursing practice in psychiatric mental health, and I'd like to suggest a modification to WAC 246-929-315 that would identify intentional peer support, also known as IPS. That's an industry recognized international organization eligible to provide continuing education courses for peer specialists. And for those of you who may not know much about IPS, there was a literature review on peer support services published back in 2019 that identified IPS as one of two main transformational concepts of peer support services. It's basically a philosophical descendant of the informal peer support movement in the 70s that grew from the informal practices of grassroots initiated peer support, but it differs from earlier approaches because it's theoretically based. It has manualized approach with clear goals and a fidelity tool for practitioners. It really focuses on the nature and purpose of the peer support relationship and its attention to skill building to purposefully engage in peer support relationships that promote mutual healing and growth. So to further support the foundation of fidelity IPS has been built upon, I do have some other publications I can reference today for you, being that you're going to review this footage later. Do you have just a little bit of time for that?
Well, it depends, because we're looking at the organizations, not necessarily some of the publications or the specifics for what they are. But I can tell you, you're not the first person that has mentioned this. Somebody mentioned it in one of our previous ones. We just haven't updated the language on this here. So it's on my list of things to look at and possibly including onto this list for intentional peer support.
I'm happy you guys are looking into that because it is an international organization that has a wide reputation across different countries for being the industry standard for trauma-informed peer support. And it has so many fidelity tools that will definitely supplement us in our capacity to lead supervision and make supervision more based in mutuality and the peer support principles, the foundational principles of IPS.
Okay. Yeah, no, it sounds exactly like what we're looking for. Okay. Do you have any more, or is it just?
I do. I just didn't know if we had time for it.
We might not. Do you want to reach out to me individually? Maybe send me an email.
Yes. Can I speak to the supervision part since we've been talking about that today?
Sure.
Well, one thing about IPS that we can keep in mind is that there is actually a tool that was developed that functions in conjunction with the core competencies that are outlined in the core materials of IPS. And that tool is a valid tool to complement the assessment of those core competencies, and it's got internal consistency, it's got test, retest, reliability, convergent validity. Why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because it's going to be really useful for demonstrating efficacy around peer support services through research down the line, especially in ways that supplement supervision provided by advanced practice registered nurses such as myself. And having IPS included in the continuing education list is going to be very relevant to the supervision aspiration of these rules. And there's already countries that have considered it being a bridge to making that possible, such as Australia, New Zealand, and Canada.
All right, thank you. Yeah, because that wouldn't meet that 6 hours of CE supervision, for taking courses like that. And again, it says on here are include but are not limited to the following, so it could still potentially qualify even if it wasn't on the list, because we don't want to limit it to only ones we identified during rulemaking. New ones can pop up, different things like that. So,
But IPS, I just wanted to be known that IPS has a very strong history. It is like one of the foundational organizations and training curriculums for peer support across the world. I think it deserves to be on this list.
okay,
Okay.
thank you. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns before we move on to the ethical guidelines?
I just have one more comment. I have one more comment about supervision. Just to give you some context into the evolution of peer support around the world and how certain countries have attempted to bring some fidelity and framework guidance to the modality. A learning network for improving mental health services in Australia and New Zealand began to work through an abstract back in 2017 that acknowledged that they had this emerging peer workforce across Australia and New Zealand, but they had no agreed framework for supervisors or managers to best support peer workers to perform their roles. So they ended up proposing intentional peer support as the meaningful framework they would use, not only for practice, but for supervisors and peer workers to establish these effective supervision relationships that echo through practice and draw upon the 3 principles of IPS.
Mike, get your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, and thank you, Dr. Gregg, for the information I did not know about how peer support services are approached elsewhere. That's very cool. I'll be interested to learn more.